Geswil, Switzerland. Carl Gustav Jung was born in 1835, son from his parents Emily Perswick and his father Johannes Paul Achilles Jung, who was a pastor, a profession that had traditions in the family. Carl Gustav remained a single child for a long time before the birth of his sister, Gertrude. Several of his childhood memories inspired many of his latter theories. As a boy, he carved a tiny mannequin into the end of a wooden ruler and placed it inside a pencil case. Then periodically, he would come back to the mannequin, bringing with him tiny sheets of paper with messages inscribed in his own secret language. This ceremonial act, as he later reflected, brought him a feeling of inner peace and security. A very unfrequented and introverted child, Jung was convinced from childhood that he had two personalities, a modern Swiss citizen and a personality more at home in the 18th century. Personality number one, which he coined, was a typical schoolboy living in the era of time, while number two was a dignified, authoritative, and influential man from the past. In latter years, he discovered that similarities existed in this memory and the totems of people, like the collections of soul stones near Arlesham or the Chirungas of Australia. He concluded that unconscious ritual that he did not question nor understand at that time was practiced in a strikingly similar way in faraway locations that he, as a young boy, had no way of consciously knowing about. Years after, his theories of psychological archetypes and the collective unconscious were inspired in part by this experience. Jung wanted to study archaeology, but his family was not wealthy enough to send him further afield than University of Basel, where they did not teach this subject. Then instead, Jung studied medicine at the said university from 1894 to 1900. The formerly introverted student became much more livelier, and in 1903, Jung married Emma Rosenbach from one of the richest families in Switzerland. Towards the end of his studies, Jung decided that he would specialize in psychiatric medicine. He later worked in Burgosli, a psychiatric hospital in Zurich. In 1906, he published Studies in Word Association and later sent a copy of this book to famed psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, after which a close friendship between these two men followed for some 6 years. In 1913, Jung published The Psychology of the Unconscious, resulting to a theoretical divergence between Jung and Freud, and resulted into a breakup in their friendship. They both stated that the other was unable to admit that one could possibly be wrong. After this fallout, Jung went through a pivotal and difficult psychological transformation, which was exacerbated by news of the First World War. Henry Ellenberger called Jung's experience a creative illness and compared it to Freud's period of what he called neurasthenia and hysteria. Following the First World War, Jung became a world traveler, facilitated by his wife's inherited fortune, as well as the funds he generated through psychiatric fees, book sales, and honoraria. He visited the Northern Africa shortly after, and New Mexico and Kenya in the mid-1920s. In 1938, he delivered the Terry Lectures, Psychology and Religion at Yale University. It was also about this age in his life that Jung visited India. His experience in India led him to become fascinated and deeply involved with Eastern philosophies and religion, helping him come up with a key concept of his ideology, including integrating spirituality into everyday life and appreciation of the unconscious. Jung's marriage with Emma produced 5 children and lasted until Emma's death in 1955. But certainly, she experienced emotional drama brought about by Jung's relationship with other women. The most well-known women with whom Jung is believed to have an extramarital affair are patient and friend Sabrina Spillrain and Toni Wolff. Jung continued to publish books until the end of his life, including a work of his late interest in flying saucers. Jung's work on himself and his patients convinced him that life has a spiritual purpose beyond material goals. Our main task, he believed, is to discover and fulfill our deep innate potential, such as a corn contains the potential to become the oak or the caterpillar to become the butterfly. Based on the study of Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Gnosticism, Taoism, and other traditions, Jung perceived that this journey of transformation is at the mystical heart of all religions. It is a journey to meet the self and at the same time to meet the divine. Unlike Sigmund Freud, Jung thought that spiritual experience was essential to our well-being. Jung was only 30 years old when he sent his work, Studies in World Association, to Sigmund Freud in Vienna. Notably, the first conversation between Jung and Freud lasted over 13 hours. Half a year later, the 50-year-old Freud reciprocated by sending a collection of his latest published essays to Jung in Zurich. This marked the beginning of an intense correspondence and collaboration that lasted more than 6 years and ended shortly before the First World War in May 1914, when Jung resigned as the chairman of the International Psychoanalytical Association. In 1908, Jung became the editor of the newly founded Book for Psychoanalytical and Psychopathological Research. The following year, Jung traveled with Freud and Sandor Ferenczi to the United States to spread the news of psychoanalysis. In 1910, Jung became the chairman for life of the International Psychoanalytical Association. While Jung worked on his book, The Symbols of Transformation, tensions grew between Freud and himself, due in a large part to their disagreements over the nature of libido and religion. Jung and Freud personally met for the last time in September 1913 for the 4th International Psychoanalytical Congress, also in Munich. Jung gave a talk on psychological types, the introverted and the extroverted type, in analytical psychology. This constituted the introduction of some of the key concepts which came to distinguish Jung's work from Freud's in the next half-century. In the following years, Jung experienced considerable isolation in his professional life. His 7 sermons to the death, reprinted in the autobiography Memories, Dreams, Reflections, can also be read as expression of the psychological conflicts which beset Jung around the age of 40 after the break with Freud. The latter part of Jung's life, he described his near-death experience on his autobiography Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. In a hospital in Switzerland in 1944, the world-renowned psychiatrist had a heart attack and a near-death experience. His vivid encounter with the light, plus the intensely meaningful insights, led Jung to conclude that his experience came from something real and eternal. In an effort to make his work more famous, and with a firm conviction that it would be the ordinary people who would carry on his psychology, Jung decided to write and get published his autobiography, memories, dreams, reflections, as well as a collaborative work entitled Man and His Symbols, explaining his psychology in a most fundamental way, was an appeal for the public to realize the reality of the unconscious and, above all, to take their own souls seriously. Jung died in Kuznach near Zurich at 3:45 on Tuesday afternoon, June 6, 1961. It was synchronistic that about an hour or so afterwards, lightning struck at a tall poplar tree in his garden at the lake's edge.